It's an honor to be here. This is a historic week for diplomacy, and I want to just talk for a moment about maybe another kind of diplomacy, and that is people-to-people diplomacy. You know, we launched with your help 1 year ago. In that period of time, we've had Americans come from all 50 states in the country, and they've stayed with host here in Cuba. And we estimate now that 20% of all Americans that are staying in Cuba are staying in a home with a Cuba host. What they say is that they come here with 50 years of questions, and they have 3 days to ask them. But I think it's been an amazing experience and an unbelievable story. You know, we just got the word from the White House that a day ago we were going to be allowed to have not just Americans stay with Cuban host, but guests from all over the world. I mentioned this to a Cuban host, and she actually started crying. And she explained to me that this would allow her to finally be able to complete paying the bills for their family and fix up her home. I met another host last night, and she said, we open our doors, we open our hearts, and what we care most about is not just the money we make, but the friendships we make. And they used to say that they had a lot of misconceptions about Americans, and it's hard to have misconceptions about Americans when you actually host them in your homes. And the same thing's true with Americans, and I think people all over the world. I think there's hundreds of thousands of new friendships that are possible if we can bring people together.
That's great. I just want to brag on Brian just for 1 second. First of all, for those Cubans who are not familiar with Brian, you can see how young he is. The company that he started, AirBnB, basically started as an idea with his co-founder, who's also here. And how long ago did you guys start, Brian? 8 years. And what's the valuation now? Don't be shy. How 25 billion with a B? Okay. So, but I use Brian as an example. He's one of our outstanding young entrepreneurs who had an idea and acted on it. And in this global economy, it can take off if it's a good idea and it's well executed. But I also think Brian's a good example of the power of the internet and why having an internet infrastructure is so important. Because essentially, Airbnb is using social media and the internet in order to create a buyer and a seller and a market that is safe for those buyers and sellers that didn't previously exist. I mean, it used to be if an American or a German or anybody wanted to come to Cuba, they could go to a hotel and that was it. Now, suddenly, there are thousands of potential sellers of a great experience here in Cuba, and they themselves become small business people, but it's only possible because somebody in Germany can look up online and see, okay, that's a house, that looks nice, there's a nice picture. There's been a good rating of the host, right? They've found out that when you get there, the room actually looks like the room on the internet. The person who's inviting somebody into their home, they can check, and they've seen that, okay, the person who's using this has a good credit rating, and if they've stayed at Airbnb before, they haven't completely torn up the house. And so it's a tool to build trust and allow this transaction to take place. But it's if you imagine what could be done with broader internet access and service here, Brian, I think, gives you a good example of the potential that could be unleashed. But it requires an infrastructure and an investment in order to make it work. Thank you for sharing your story, Brian.